Hello, everyone. The title of today's episode is Experience Creates Structure Upon Existence. These Mr. Within talks are kind of my digital notepad, and in them, I, in some sense, raise very important questions. And fundamentally, when I looked at life, just like how the scientists saw an object and had enough explorational ability, had enough of a curiosity and wonder to see what is making that object be that object. So, similarly, I looked at the story of life. I looked at how consciousness is making everything into a story in order to have a sort of the context given to objective phenomena is subjective. And that's very crucial to understand because our experience seems to be an aspect of our intelligence, like a chemical reaction, reacting with existence to be something. That means everything in this world, if you look at it materialistically, objects are here. And some of these objects they remain longer than we are alive, and some of them don't remain longer than we're alive. That means there's organic matter, and that organic matter fades. When we look at what we are, we seem to be an organic sort of creature that once acknowledging its mortality, begins to articulate a path through the unknown by aligning its knowledge to an I thought. The I thought is the identity. So if I ask you who you are, before you give me an answer, what you are looking at behind your eyes, that is you. That is what you think you are. Most people think they are a thought. I will say this as long as these talks continue, that we are in the era of ideal worship. That means our ancestors, the people in the back in the day, worship idols. They thought rocks and stones and trees were their gods, were their ultimate truth. But eventually, that ultimate truth was constantly rejected. It was constantly rejected and eventually led to a point where I believe it was the narrative of Ibrahim, at least in the Islamic context. And what Ibrahim did, was that he, in some sense, went and saw people worshiping their idols, a sort of pantheism going on, you know. And as these people saw this pantheism, as Ibrahim saw this pantheism, there's this religious story where he goes and breaks all the idols of people when they're not there, once failing to convince them that they are not the truth. And so what he does is, like, in a room where this is in some sense the story of Mecca, of the Kaaba. So where the Muslims, in some sense, go to pilgrimage. It's a unique location, and the significance of that unique location was that it was, in some sense, one of a room where a profound realization occurred, you can say. So Ibrahim, what he does is that, let's say there's like a bunch of people, a bunch of fake idols just made from stick stones or whatever they could find, and once all these people are gone, the idol worshippers, Abraham comes and breaks all the idols and puts the shovel or the stick or whatever right beside one of the gods. And then all the people come into the room and they see Abraham's, like, beside the only idol, like, that's left, and all the broken idols. And the people are like, Abraham, did you do this? And Abraham's like, no, look, your God did it. The God with the stick did it, And so that's when they begin to kind of doubt data. And our species, it took us a long time to be able to doubt reality, you know? But the problem with doubt is that it, just like somebody finding a new tool for the same time, it can be overused. And when it's overused, the color of reality shifts. It fades a little. So in other words, Rene Descartes, this French philosopher, Rene Descartes, this French philosopher, his inspiration, in some sense, was a sort of methodical doubt. Like, if you were a student of Rene Descartes, he'd probably tell you doubt everything except what you cannot doubt. And for Rene Descartes, he had considered this isolated subjective observer within every person, which you cannot doubt. You cannot doubt how consciousness is being phenomenal. You cannot doubt how your mind is being the moment, how the moment is material, made of matter, and in some sense that which observes it. So we are intelligence plus objective phenomena. Now, our efforts to objective, by thinking that we're just objective creatures and trying to have this effort to kind of see what we are more than that, we entered the realm of subjectivity. Subjectivity is a sort of bridge between the body and the mind. Okay, there's many ways you can classify these hierarchies. Whenever something becomes multidimensional, if you notice it, that multidimensionality arises from an individual dimension. So it is people's personal experience that begins to define how the impersonal experience of the whole world is occurring. You see, that means the way you classify life, the way you feel things are good and bad, actually arise from how you feel you're a self in a good and bad world. For me, the religions were just trying to keep the unknown inner dimensions of mankind alive, because it was so easy to get caught into objectivity. But unfortunately, the religious intention was misused. What that means is, imagine your father, like your actual father, for example, comes and says something very nice. Now imagine the words of your father, your actual, family father, you begin to misuse the words, Like your father said, don't be late, but didn't tell you the time. So you're like, he didn't choose where to be late. So there's a sort of manipulation going on of data that is passed down. But in some sense, we cannot avoid it. I can't avoid how the future generations are going to hear my words. But I can in some sense contribute by saying what I saw while I was alive. That's kind of like the motivation. So how experience creates structure upon existence is very fascinating, because we look at existence and we feel it's something we can know, and it's something that our knowledge is our experience. But in some sense, what is moving knowledge is an unknown momentum. So just like how we look at the forces of nature and we're like, holy shit, spheres of matter, visible matter, are like hovering in empty space, and we're all, our planet's orbiting around the sun. Do you see? For me, it's like motion defines activity and intelligence. So if our existence is to become intelligent, we must acknowledge its greatest movements. You got to study how you're existing and moving in the moment. You got to forget every idea you have ever been given and give yourself the permission of a new surge. That new surge will become a new self. And this is how the life works. You can't just suddenly wake up and feel like you weren't the person you were yesterday. Everything that you speak on this day will echo either internally or externally till tomorrow, its consequences. So for me, experience, what is it? If somebody asked, honestly, what is experience? Imagine a street smart guy from a bazaar, from a busy marketplace, saw this enlightened guy and went up to him and said, hey man, listen, I don't have time, I gotta go do business, but just tell me, what is experience? What is this truth? And the enlightened guy would tell him, after you have walked in the stories of life long enough, you will begin to notice aspects of it that are unknown. You will see the edge of the collective knowledge. The edge of the collective knowledge is pretty much these unknown doors in our perception we see, which no man can open, because it is not done by an individual consciousness. Some technologies evolve out of an individual intent. You just want to do something for yourself, you just quickly find a solution, make something for it or whatever. But in regards to a collective technology, this technology has to become valid to many individual members. So for me, why capitalism, I think, thrived economically was that it came with the freedom of idea, even though the system was cruel. So for me, when I look at countries, I will tell you, you shouldn't say a country is developed or not just based on its GDP or like just its military or technological standing. A country is as free as the minds of its individuals are, and the minds of the individuals are as free as they feel they are free to be in the world or in that part of the world or society. So we have to, in some sense, redesign our civilization by caring for not just external experience, not just giving value to externality, but to that which is observes externality to, in some sense, very beautifully restructure it through subtler subjectivity. You are experiencing existence, but you're also existing as an experience. So for me, life started. I remember because I have memories of moments before I learned language. I call it the pre-thought moment. One of my earliest memories. However, one of my earliest memories for this life is actually a dream. I remember one of my earliest memory is a nightmare. Believe it or not, strangely, my first childhood nightmare. But I remember because there was a certain point in my memory when I learned language. When I learned language, guys, I will tell you something fascinating about the mind. When I was 7 years old, I went to Vancouver. Okay, I was born in Iran. My family moved to Vancouver. My father had lived in the States, so we wanted to kind of come and embrace the Western world. And so what happened is that at the age of 7, I was in Vancouver, and I remember in grade 1, I was in class, and I only knew 2 words. Like I would speak Farsi at home, and I only knew two English words, yes and no. And I remember I was in class, and I don't know what happened, but grade 1, we had this. I don't know, for some reason, I had like an incredibly angry lady as a grade 1 teacher. I don't know how she got the job. I hope like somebody figures that out. But this lady, I remember I was there in that class, and I just see she's angry, and then I remember she comes and says something, to me, and she starts shouting at me, you know, and she shouts something as if she's like asking a question and like also being intense. So as a child, I just knew yes and no, so I said yes. Like she asked me a question and I said yes. Okay. And then she started laughing, and then she asked me another question. I said no, and I was just doing this basic maneuver of yes, no, yes. And so what happened was actually later on, when I actually learned the English language, the memory of what she said then became active. As if back then, before I had learned the English language, my ears recorded the sound of her voice, the sounds, and just the image of the moment, right? But when I learned English, those sounds got a meaning. I suddenly went into that memory again, and suddenly I noticed. I don't know how to tell you, but she was telling me, "Do you want to go to like the principal's office or something?" You know, I think it was because I wasn't engaging or something, the class or whatever. But so the words from that memory, which were vague, suddenly got a sort of meaning once I learned something. Oh man, Neil deGrasse Tyson had this quote where it was he was saying it on his Star Talk podcast kind of show. And what he said was something so fascinating. I don't remember exactly that. It was him and this comedian Godfrey who were talking about it. And pretty much he said they asked a question from a scientist, and the scientist found a way, was clever enough to see through such data that it made the question obscure. Like it made the question not have meaning. So sometimes in the efforts of finding an answer to a problem of your life, you enter a reality where the way that reality is kept, in some sense, makes the previous problems of your past not exist. So think of it this way: most people want to be millionaires or billionaires or whatever. You know, most people want to be like incredibly wealthy. Okay, now let's say the moment you become incredibly wealthy, suddenly the problems, all those memories, like imagine somebody just gave you $1 million right now. Okay, now imagine in after you've gotten that $1 million, in that moment right after, you think about your past and you realize the misery and suffering that the imagery of your past was creating, of your lack of success or wealth or incapability or inefficiency, suddenly has become meaningless to the attainment of a new reality that like does not work in that way. So what I'm trying to tell you is that our new experiences realign us in such a way that many of our past experiences shift in meaning. So the future is constantly realigning its past. So believe it or not, the future can never travel to the past because the past has changed. It doesn't know what the past is. I don't believe in time travel, guys. I think in this moment I just realized I can't believe in time travel. I feel the past that we want to reach is no longer there because the future constantly reboxes itself, recontains itself, you know. And so that when it recontains itself, it's, how can I tell you? It's like an image no longer defines the intelligence. In the subtitle, I've said motivated phenomena. Pretty much the idea there is what I consider to be life is a moment. At least in my experience, it's a moment, and there's phenomena here, and this phenomena organizes itself into different patterns of intelligence, and these patterns of intelligence are usually motivated out of an I thought, out of a thought of self. So your sense of self dictates the boundaries and the edges of your awareness. So when Socrates said the only true wisdom is to know that you know nothing, what he meant was that the edge of your story of life is where the truth of our experience is present. I thought of a fascinating concept. I thought, what if hell was in a simulation of Earth? And what if Earth was a simulation in heaven? That means, what if heaven created Earth to experience hell? That means from the heavens there came an intention of this design. Now, what the heavens is based on the story you have. If you're a religious person hearing this talk, you're going to look at the heavens and you're going to think of the glory of the creator of all creation. If you're not religious and you look at what I'm saying, the heavens, you begin to wonder about the edge of the unknown. And this is what religion and science and every other ideology has in common. They all have an edge which eventually it's unknown. That means the religious person cannot claim they know everything because God is the only knower. You know, in Islam, I remember I went to an Islamic person, you know, a Muslim, and I very politely and respectfully, because I didn't know enough about, how can I say, like, I asked a Sunni friend of mine. I was raised in a Shia kind of Islamic setting. That was the first wave of data that hit me, you know, and I asked, what is the soul from the Islamic viewpoint, and the answer was that the soul is a secret of God. That means when man wonders even about what he is, he sees all his individual will is basking in a collective will. The same way scientists see that the forces of nature, the elements and the, like, you know, the various forces, science app, what is it, heart, whether you call it electromagnetic, gravitational, these vaster forces that influence our individual existence, it can be said to be the same interpretation that religion has, that some creator is influencing everything on an individual level. Pretty much, man's superstition was an attempt to comprehend the macrocosm. And the early attempts were through personality because there was no science back in the day. So they had only personalities. So these personalities had to expand their knowledge through the stories of people. Do you see? So when you see religion, it's answering a sort of cultural, a sort of social level, but science is on an intellectual level. An intellectual level means that because it wants to see the ultimate truth of the physics of the world, it cannot think about morality yet. Its attention must first go on the mystery and the exploration before it has a sort of a conviction. But you see, religion has, in some sense, an overwhelmment in it. The religious individual finds himself that the macrocosm is so vast, and because the person considers himself to be intelligence, the story of intelligence has to have an intelligent source. So that means the moment you see yourself as the dictator of your free will, it's not so hard to also see like a sub-personality behind the skies dictating everything, you know? The era of idea worship is also the same era of simulation theory. This is like in 2019 till 2050, a very unique change in the thought structure of people is going to occur. We have to make decisions of how much we're going to align with nature, how much we're going to align with what we have conceived and unnatural technology. Because when a technology doesn't care for the world, it's unnatural. Do you see what I mean? It's unnatural because it is, in some sense, against the intention of nature's survival. Now, nature is a chaotic place. We say that we came from the jungles, and then we built cities. So we built our own civility and civilizations. Just like how we built civilization as a species, we also built a state of civility of mind, a state of individual respect which opens up the collective performance. That means if all the audience members just start throwing stuff at the actor will never get to act. And the most tragic thing in history is when an audience, you can say a theater audience of life, does not allow life to redeem itself. That is when our species is at a red alert danger zone of inner moral extinction. Our morality becomes, in some sense, it will go extinct when there are no longer second chances. When no longer the species cares for itself, the species is already dead. It doesn't matter. The problem with the leadership is that some people think leadership is like, I want to be a leader, la la la. They think it's something like that. Leadership is chaos. As the leader acknowledges the intensity and importance of the chaos or the chaotic movement first. So what that means is some of the greatest leaders have been some of the most terrified kind of people. Their terror came because they had to be responsible for everything. It's as if the group became them, became the leader. When Martin Luther King spoke, and when he was trying to reverse engineer a confusion of mankind, you see, if you blame people for problems that are occurring to all of us, you, in some sense, how can I tell you? Do you know if you give a person enough guilt, they will start living against themselves? Do you know that if imagine whoever you are, for me, I think people, if they don't just see others as bodies, as objects, but they see that these people in front of them have sophisticated minds. They have these, behind your eyes, do you know how many worlds you walk through on a daily basis? Your attention is a god of your thoughts. And so what every branch of knowledge has in common is the space in between and the sky of the unknown. And intelligence is arising from unknown levels of self-inquiry. That means nobody can prove to you that state of being, because that state of being doesn't function as an individual. It's like you're more a moment that never changed, experiencing change. Like right now, let's say you're using your phone or your laptop or whatever to get access to this, like hearing this right now, right? So you see that you are not your phone. Why are you not your phone? Because you're observing it outside of that object. Okay? So in ancient mysticism, when these dudes went into the cave and they meditated, it wasn't like they were just blind people, like foolish people, just robot. They weren't robots. Okay? They were actual beings. And what that means is that they went to find the edge of their unknown and become content with the unknown. After being content with the unknown, they were able to allow knowledge to move in its freedom. You can't give yourself freedom if you feel the world is against moving against you. Any person right now who feels there is a force outside on a daily basis negative to them, I am telling you, your mind has not understood its efficiency, its potential efficiency. Sometimes clarity means silence. Sometimes clarity means stillness. Sometimes we need to uh, uh, look at knowledge from different angles of acceptance. We have to also look at people, because I'm telling you, behind our eyes there's a multidimensional phenomena going on. In front of our eyes it's just a singular objective dimension where it's like, so this is the profound thing. Science tells us that there's three dimensions. There's three dimensions, and the fourth dimension is time. Okay? So that means we looked at objects and we're like, okay, this object is 3D, it's three-dimensional. But now I don't want to, like, before we even think about the fourth dimension, just take this in. We are saying, matter is three-dimensional, but where the thought of the three-dimensional, where that word has meaning is not in matter. That means the dimensions imposed on matter are not materialistic. They seem to be subjective and unknown, and beyond unknown. Do you see? So I'm telling you, we are beings that are, in some sense, oscillating through a story of life between two dimensions. As we have a subjective component and we have an objective component to our moments. Right? Now, I'm saying we have all just been trying to survive like animals, but the whole point of evolution was to get out of a state of just, like, we're constantly trying to engage with activities that expand the horizons of our experience. So we want to exist in ways where our experience is maxed out, playfully saying. So when I look at, like, guys, I'm telling you, this is what a lot of lot of parents, you can say, and a lot of people, immigrants from other countries coming to Western countries, what they don't know yet, not even their ancestry knew, is a sort of freedom to live, but the point of life is to live at its max. Like, how would I say it? Sadhguru, this yogi, said it best. He said, how would I say it? He said, a fulfilled life is a life where you're experiencing all of its dimensions. Do you see? A fulfilled life is a life where fully the dimensions are being made aware of. That means the best thing you can do before the final curtain of, of a temporary creature is pulled, is to study your intelligence, study yourself, and in studying yourself, suddenly realizing the way you're not just an image of your body, you are a foundational, the body is a platform. The body is like a lift-off platform. And so the navigator is the attention. And this attention first acknowledges the physical reality is like given imagination. It's freely given. That's what reality is. You don't have to think for it to have meaning. It's just something already. Okay, it's a design present. And so when we look at the presence of this design, we cannot avoid the presence of our attention that is allowing that design to be a part of our awareness. If I tell you what kind of creature you are, you will probably say I'm a creature that my senses command my identity. Your sensory perception commands your identity because it gives you the data for you to sculpt a sort of identity in this unknown atmosphere of self-awareness. What I'm trying to get to, dear listeners, is that we gotta all calm down from our beliefs. So I'm saying that in two ways, playfully. One, we gotta calm down, just relax. And the other way, I'm saying we gotta come down from our beliefs. We gotta recognize that ideas are not us, or we will forever be our lives will be forever dictated by those thoughts. And so I'm telling you, recognize you are like this very unique and mysterious communication of this universal sector, an advanced communication of the universal sector. That's how I'm acknowledging. I'm telling you, come and stand on that hill where we're looking at life in that way. Where before we give it so many laws that chain us into programs of belief or disbelief, disbelief can be a program too. It can be like it, I'm telling you, you're not a thought, but you can live in a thought for the rest of your life. And so if you're not a thought, what are you? And I'm telling you, now you have come to the table of the philosophers. Now you have come and you're standing where, how can I tell you, where I'm standing with Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, Friedrich Nietzsche, all these philosophers who acknowledged the unknown was the purpose of philosophy. This is why there was efforts of imagination to conceptualize reality. And when these efforts of conceptualization are not valued, when the atheist bashes the theist and the theist judges the atheist, it becomes a foolishness. As if a group of people are sitting there with suits and you're like, oh, this is progress. The two sides of the team are sitting there and debating about if God is here or not, And I'm saying while aspects of our population are constantly focusing on certain battlegrounds of thought, it's as if the war can be as much of an illusion as like the playground. The battlefield can be as much of an illusion as the playground. We shouldn't accept knowledge before thoroughly observing the unknown. And when you thoroughly observe the unknown, it is endless. It is the first effort, the first time your mind kind of was baffled by a sort of infinite quality was when it noticed emptiness stretching all over the universe. Emptiness for me was a sort of chaotic infinity to my previous ordered perceptions. So the motivation of phenomena oscillates between thinking existence is arising experience and then thinking experience is arising existence. That means we oscillate between experiencing ourselves as a body that is projecting a mind, or a mind that is projecting a body. And another way of saying this is that we're oscillating between existence and non-existence. That means just like how we blink, just like when we sleep, it's like our whole world is blinking. You see? Like there's an oscillation between nothingness, suddenly, oh my God, there's something, that it's today. And then suddenly you go to sleep and, oh my God, nothingness. And then you suddenly see, oh my God, something else arises. So for me, I was personally on an inner dimension. As in my childhood, I was overwhelmed. Like people thought I'm pretty sure people perceived I was a bit strange, but I was strange because I was overwhelmed by an unending spectrum. I thought, what is this life? Just every day I wake up, phenomena. Every day I wake up, phenomena. Now, some days I try to control this phenomena, karma hits back. Sometimes I don't try to control this phenomena, I experience the depths of my mind. So what is this? What is this constant repetition? And repetition is a chaotic point of being able to become content with the unknown. Some things are cyclical, ladies and gentlemen. So if you define your free will something that doesn't have to listen to the cyclical patterns of nature, you will in some sense be crushed by the laws of nature because you're not paying attention to them. And I'm saying this very playfully, you don't get crushed by nature, Nature is actually very graceful in its advancement. My mind has written books, but my hand has written not as much. And what I perceive in the writing of a sentence to be the alignment of matter, thought, and the prime mover of awareness, which I consider its attributeless and undescribable. So I'm telling you guys, even if anybody wanted to believe what I'm saying, you're believing an attributeless unknown. So I've made sure to kind of speak and to arrange my philosophies in a way where if somebody attempts to believe what I'm saying, they will eventually come to the unknown. You know, because I'm telling you, the world is too big for our eyes, but our eyes have to do the best they can, so they shape a world out of it, and then we shape an identity. And I use thought. I see my mind as a sort of like how you pour a cup of tea, and it's in the domain of your own free will. My mind behaves in its own world with its own rules and its own interpretation of the rules of nature. But when I go out in society and I go into moments where there is suddenly the responsibility of the species to be held, that means when you leave the house, don't leave the house as if you're just some guy. Leave the house as if the moment you step your feet out, you are here. The whole purpose of life is to advance our civilization. If you think otherwise, you're foolish. And to advance our civilization means the individual members of the civilization must begin caring for the minds of other people. When you care for the minds of other people, you begin suddenly opening up to realms of space and personal space, like as if like every person has a orb around them. Imagine, imagine this kind of like hologram sphere of light around them. I'm speaking playfully here. This orb is the realm of their acceptance of the outside world. And if that is not respected, and if a person becomes too uncomfortable in society, unfortunately, because the ego is a child, it will hate the world. So anybody who hates something that took billions of years to exist and happen with such sophistication and be present for us is a fool. So somebody who is allowing themselves to be stressed or depressed, it does not understand in the opportunity cost of that moment. You should be not thinking of an incapable self, rather wondering about the capable self of your future children, and be living a day like that with a sense of universal responsibility. And guys, I don't know how to tell you this, but the only solution to the chains of karma is honesty. It's not trying to be good, acting saintly and shit. It's not that. It's honesty. It's to be aware that you don't have to constantly impose attempts from your inner reality to manipulate the outer reality. You can calm down and just bask in the free green fields of decency. Trust me, it just aligns your life. So once you become truly honest, the illusion begins to crack. The illusion of your sensory perception, or how your sensory perception is turning into thoughts. When you wake up in a day and you see, holy shit, something you believed your whole life, you suddenly forgot what it was, you're found in a new moment. You have entered a new territory of the terra incognita of your mind, the uncharted abstraction that in some sense Carl Jung attempted to make the unconscious conscious, which was his great call. I feel he could have done it more heroically, but perhaps he was too busy. But Carl Jung, his effort was, he pretty much looked at the great grandchildren of mankind and shouted at them. Your whole task is not to just live in programs of nature and programs of subjective belief. Your whole your purpose in this life, he in some sense had to also include the exploration of your unconscious and how it becomes the conscious. And once the consciousness it puts an effort to move beyond its edge, that's when the subconscious comes into the picture. And the subconscious, it was so fascinating because Carl Jung saw it. Oh my god, I'm talking too fast. My excitement's running faster than my thoughts. Oh my god. Carl Jung said, guys, when you go wonder about the unconscious, what you realize is that the conscious suddenly has to embrace a new unknown territory of exploration, and in doing so will have to include new data in its previous data. So your belief based on your new experience is never the same belief. Something has changed. And when you realize change is a sort of way this world is working, you don't become sad about it. You don't ascribe unnecessary emotions of fear, doubt, hopelessness, anxiety, even nostalgia. Because the whole point is we think, okay, if we want an advanced civilization, we want an efficient civilization. In order for the whole civilization to be efficient, we have to start as a species, as a collective, compassionate, visionary force, begin to wonder about people's individual realms, people's individual realities. Technology has created a sort of, mass, incredible global stage. But now this global stage needs to be injected with authentic data. Authentic data is we have to start living as naturally as possible, and then finding from a naturally balanced way of living. That means your first task should be to handle your objectivity, your body in a natural way. Okay, you got to find a natural health. You got to find your pace. You got to find how you can live. Your body can be in a stage where it's manageable enough to allow you to even manage your mind and thoughts. Because if the body is too disturbed, this is my consideration. If the body goes below 70% being disturbed or intoxicated, conceptually you feel you can't reach your conscious thoughts anymore. So whenever you move towards an objective unconsciousness rather than your subjective unconscious, which is a different way of using that word, pretty much you discover, let's go back to archetypes, you discover archetypes. Archetypes are how your current personality is actually, imagine a bunch of lines intersecting one point, okay? The archetypes are those lines, are sort of character, personality traits. You see, it's like the archetypes of ancient people could have been how they saw many gods in the sky. So the personality of people began becoming based on the multiplicity of many stories occurring at once. As if while we're here on Earth, the ancient Greeks looked at the sky and were like, "Holy shit, gods are walking on clouds. How's that possible?" And so, like, do you see? It's the world is changing all the time, and we respond to it based on what our attention has been on the most. If your attention has been on technology the most, your life like, it's so easy to tell your life purpose. Just figure out where your attention is going. That's why at some point you see nobody can give you better advice than yourself, because nobody has your eyes, and it's up to your engagement with not your inner environment but also your outer environment that suggests who you are. That means if you don't, how would I say it? I don't want to enforce this, but like I want to say that any moment you can help throughout the day, anything, and authentically help. That means you don't help until you see it can be done. It can be done properly, okay? And in some sense, if you can help. If something from the outer world can require your assistance, contribute. Civilization is not built in one day. And civilization is not like we're putting a poster on the wall and we're like, we want this for civilization. Civilization is a dynamic movement. It's like back in the day, they had this picture of a whole city being on the shell of this giant turtle. As if back in the day people were studying, like the scientists of that world were studying, they're like, holy shit, our mountain is this giant turtle's back, And so, so what I'm trying to say is that it's a moving, living phenomenon. And it's not just limited to our individual realm. And it's not just that people are individual. If this universe has had an ability to allow individual consciousness to arise, it has also allowed collective beings to exist. These collective beings, one way we can playfully see them, this is what I call the empty collective being. The hollow collective being, which is how a group of people all believe in one thought. That thought is like a collective being. It is shaping the experiences of people. True mysticism will require, in some sense, an angry, honest rebellion from within. You're rebelling against your childhood conditioning, but you're not rebelling at it as a savage that just wants to destroy what hurt it once. You know, you're in some sense studying. Studying means look at what the hell's there and then make a decision. Don't just make the decision before you've looked at what's there. And so this is so important in education. It should be something written on the walls of every school. That the unknown holds knowledge, and knowledge can be your own truth. But find the collective truth. Help the civilization. We should create schools where in the youngest, as children are being raised in this educational system, they have a value. They see that the world is worth living for, not a place to just waste your moments in just ambiguous luxury. It's so easy to hide, but it's also boring. It's boring. Excuse my language, but it's boring as fuck to stay in your comfort zone. That's the problem. Boredom becomes the ultimate motivation. You got to look at where you're bored in your life, and that's where you can find the sort of great momentum. You know, the educational system should be designed in a way where the child's like, okay, what is this teacher teaching? And the teacher comes into class and doesn't per se. I feel that many teachers should, in some sense, like they shouldn't interfere. They shouldn't put too much communication in the child's mind, which is very crazy because I think in a sci-fi context, it's as if the children of the world are put in rooms with a robotic intelligence, or how would I say it? Like, as much as people can behave in robotic ways by not accelerating their exploration of their sort of truth of the moment, the same way we're gonna have in schools eventually AI children. I'm going to try to suggest this towards a global audience. We have to care for existence to study our experience. We have to care for our experience to comprehend the meaning behind existence. Once this is implemented, these ideas are somehow given as values in the educational system, then they're like, how can I say it? We'll be 10,000 years ahead of our time. Playfully calculating that, you know. Thanks for listening, guys. The greatest motivation of your life is your greatest observance of your phenomena. And this is something important too. Rather than trying to get rid of the ego because you looked at too many spiritual videos on YouTube, don't try to get rid of the ego. Just study how your mind works. And your mind is currently working. Just like I'm saying words, it is in some sense bringing images, your own preferences. Everything that you are getting out of what I'm saying is actually just what your experiences have made you as. Once you understand this, you begin kind of respecting the indirect code. Society should be kept by direct codes and indirect codes. That's the evolution of our ethics. The unknown ethical responsibility and the known ethical responsibility. Our responsibility with what we know and our responsibility with what we don't know. You know, ethics for now has not really given a shit about the unknown. Okay, that means it's like how can I say it? We don't think exploration cares about the world because it's trying to find another one. Your mind will eventually, just like how you write, in writing they say just if you write whatever you do for 10,000 hours, you attain a sort of mastery to it. Okay, so we can say when the person writes and they write 10,000 sentences, they have found a sort of mastery of that sentence, how to write a sentence. After they have understood how to write a sentence, they're going to try to want to write sentences that are or arising from an original place in their experience. A place of experience that the world hasn't seen yet because it is the eyes of their childhood till now. Okay, so once the writer begins writing, eventually they will, after repeating a meaningless task endlessly, they will eventually be able to perfectly put meaning into the task. So your writer's style suddenly emerges. You begin to see how thoughts come to you sequentially, becomes your writer's style. And once you respect the rhythms of your outer experience, it begins to give you a sort of stability in your inner momentum of language use. So words become so behind your eyes, you begin experiencing a very graceful movie, but this movie becomes the style of how your hand has written a sentence so much that in some sense it becomes the thought. It knows exactly what is required. So you find your own style to living. And that own style arises from your inner presence. And that inner presence is your own activation. You got your self-awareness will teach you will reveal the secrets of your awareness in yourself. I'll tell you a very short enlightenment story. There was a man named Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj. This man was a poor man who, in some sense, sold cigarettes on the side of the street, in an Indian kind of market or somewhere, you know. And so he would sell tobacco. And so as he would do this, he was a very simple living guy, as if like he did not want a lot from life. He was just maintaining a very simple process. He didn't want more than what it was. But in Indian culture, they had the concept of enlightenment. So this man suddenly, in his friends in the market, one of his friends in the market tells him about that there's this enlightened person. And so this guy goes. This guy goes with his friend to meet this enlightened guru. And the enlightened guru is this very profound person sitting, very simply, And then he goes there and he's very kind and compassionate, and Shirin Maharaj is just there. And the guru looks at him and tells him one thing. He gives him one teaching. And the one teaching is study yourself in every moment of your waking life. That was what the guru told Shirin Nisargadatta Maharaj, who then I will tell you a little bit about his story of who he became. So after getting this instruction and being very very honored by just the instruction, Shirin Nisargadatta leaves and thanks the guru, and the guru blesses him and whatnot, and he leaves. He leaves and he comes back, and every day he has to maintain his simple life and his store and all this. And as he's there, he begins to, in some sense, every day in his lunch break, every moment, even when he's selling, whatever he's doing, he begins to study the self. He's studying how the self is being the moment. And eventually he attains. He eventually has such a single pointed attention on the study of self that he begins to break the beliefs of his self, and the truth eventually is revealed. You see? It is the intensity of your exploration that suggests what you find, the depth of your finding. It is the authenticity behind the movement that gives grace to the style of mankind. Nature is here, and so are we, ladies and gentlemen. We are free before we need to be. That's the internal quest. Thank you for listening. Much blessings and namaste.